first thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to come in here and we're going to close our index.html that we just created and close the home.txt. All right, so close those to begin with. Now, in my zeal, whatever you want to call it, to get this done, I forgot to have us do something, but it's okay because we're going to do it now. All right? I mean, we spent some time yesterday, if you remember, learning about Git. So we are going to take this and we are now going to start working with this with Git. You go, I can't do that. Yes, you can. The only person who might have problems is Chase because he wasn't here yesterday. So you're going to have to go out to, I believe I'm giving you the right URL, git-scm.com. Git-scm.com. That gets you to here. You're going to have to go down then to download 218.0 for Windows, and just go, when you do that, just go through all the defaults, and that'll put it. You got it already? Good. All right, good. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do then, if you all would please, is in our homework folder, before we do anything else, in our AWD homework folder right there, we're going to go to our Chapter 4, and we're going to go into our labs folder right there. All right? And in your labs folder that's right there, I'm going to right mouse click on it and choose Git Bash here. And that'll open this up. All right? And all we have to say for now, all we have to say for right now is just git space init. That's it. And remember that that is going to add that .git folder. So just do a git space init. All right? We'll worry about other stuff later. All right? I'm more concerned with us starting to get into the flow, so to speak, of Git. Now, Friday is the first test you're taking on your own. I'm not going to make you work with Git. But when I go over the way that I did it, all right, so when we go over that probably on Monday of next week, when I show you, please no one miss Friday, all right? So if you're planning on missing Friday, don't. All right, because I'd like to be able to go over the test on Monday. I can't do that if there's anyone who hasn't taken it yet. All right? Technically, what we are supposed to do here, in fact, I've been not reprimanded, but talked to by Charles, Mr. Corrigan, the department head. His policy is if you miss a hands-on test for any reason, he doesn't care what it is, you get a 0. All right? Now, with like what happened to Chris last year, Chris was on his way here and got into a car accident. That's a little bit different. All right? But if you're like, I overslept, I don't care. Now, if you know you're going to be gone, you're out of town or whatever, and you want to try to take that earlier, that's always something you have to talk to the instructor about. Every instructor is different. All right? But he gives 0s. He showed me his grade book. Got a lot of people who are really good students. Yeah, they were sick this day. Doesn't care. They got a 0. All right? Now, you might think that's unfair, but, that's just the way that, kind of the way that we're going here. All right? So with that in there, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Chapter 3, where I just, in labs here, where I just put this Chapter 3 lab. That's everything we just did, right? Everything. I'm going to grab that folder. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And then go over to Chapter 4. Go over to my labs and paste that in. And just so it's not too confusing, I'll change the name from Chapter 03 to Chapter 04. Yes? It did not. It did, but probably what it is you don't have it on your machine where it shows where it shows files that start with a dot. We can fix that in a little bit. Because you're going to have to go in here and go to View, and file, I think it's file name extensions. You know, I don't remember what it is, but we can get it in a little bit. All right. So everybody has that in. Everybody changed the name, correct? I just changed the name of the folder from Chapter 3 to Chapter 4. That's all I did. All right. So come in here and start making some changes. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my index file. And there's two or three things we have to do. First one is this. Look on the screen, please. Change that Chapter 3 shape up to Chapter 4 shape up. Should make sense. All right. Then what we have to do, we have to do two things here. If you look up on the screen here. Now again, they called their CSS folder styles. I don't know why he did that, but he did that. Okay? And if you look in here, this slick nav, don't worry about it. We're going to use it much later in the semester. Don't worry about it. Just pretend that isn't there for now. But if you look right here, we've got two other files. You do not have to open these, but I want to show you what's in them. Would you agree there's nothing in main? Okay. And the other one, normalize, they copied this, and there's 428 lines. What that file basically does is it turns off all the browser defaults. All right? Because we didn't do that last time because we didn't do any CSS. We will do that this time, all right, because we're going to be using CSS. All right? So in our index.html file, we've got to put in 2 lines. It is styles normalize. I think the other one is main. Is that right? Yeah. All right. So add these 2 lines right there. Make sure they're in your head section. Make sure they're done in that order. Do normalize first and then do main. Now, I could be wrong here, but to my knowledge, that's all we have to change in this file. That's literally it. But what I want you to do is bring up your empty main.css file right now. Bring that up in your editor of choice, please. All right, and then we just did the stuff for Chapter 3, so now we're going to be doing the stuff for Chapter 4. So please look up on the screen here. You can see, or hopefully you can tell, we're going to change the color of this, and we're going to add a shadow. We're going to move these because previously these 2 were down here, so we're going to move those, for lack of better words. You may or may not remember, these were blue. They're now going to be changed so that they're maroon. All right? And these down here, they were blue. But they were that dark blue. Now they're going to be changed to, I think it's steel blue. And this is going to be center. That's basically what our job is in here, is to put in all the CSS that will do that stuff. All right? So Create the external style sheet. You've already done that for the home page from the main CSS file. File is currently blank. So we're going to do this. All right. Again, I'm just going to follow their steps. So it says here, set the default font for the document to a sans. It says to a sans serif font. It doesn't say to sans serif. It says to a sans serif font. So I'm going to show you what I did. You can do that, or you can grab a different sans serif font. That's up to you. But in here in my body, remember it's font family, and I'm going to have Arial, then Helvetica, and finally sans. Whoops, that was neat. Wow, I don't know how. I just clicked the wrong button. So hold on a sec. That. And sans serif. All right. So that was the first thing that we were asked to do, was to set the default font of the document to a sans serif font. All right. Then it says adjust the font sizes for all of the headings so they look as shown above. Again, it would be nice, I think, if the author gave you some advice as far as sizing, etc., but he didn't. All right? So I'm going to tell you this is the way that I did it. When I work with this stuff, and I'd suggest you do this, but you're going to do what you want to do anyway, I suggest that you start at the top of the document and you work your way down. To me, that just makes the most sense to do that. All right? So the body is going to affect the entire document, so that's why I put that first. But the next thing that's in there is my header. So I'm going to put a comment here that says styles for the header section. All right? And the first thing I'm going to do is my image. Then I've got my H2 and my H3. All right, I'll let you put that in before we go on. In fact, the next thing is just 2 lines, or 3 lines. So. All right, let me just run it and see what I've done. Oh, you don't want to run that one. So that's what I've done so far. Okay, is I changed everything that's in my header section. All right, so I'll give you a chance to put that in, then we'll go back and talk about it. couple of you asked me questions where you brought up your homework and you asked about like relational selectors, etc. Well, if you look, hopefully this makes sense. This says I only want the images that are in the header. I only want the H2 tags that are in the header. I only want the H3 tags that are in the header. Does that make sense? All right. So if I have other H2s or H3s or images that are not in the header section, they will not be affected by this. Yes. Okay. All right. And you might say, well, you know what? It's just one page. I'm just not going to put the header in there. A lot of times that's how small websites start out. But then you add to them and add to them and add to them. So it's suggested that you write it more like this. All right. Now remember, we put that normalize in. So this right here, well, first of all, let's do the float left. This literally says move that all the way to the left that you can. Float it to the left. And if we leave that line out, just to show you this, I don't want you to do this, but I'm going to take that line and I'm going to comment it out. Everybody see that? And now I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to refresh. Now, is that pretty obvious what a float just did? It, for lack of better words, it said try to take the text and float it around the image. And image, by default, by its very nature, is one of those block tags, which means it wants a blank line above it and after it. We're telling it not to do that. All right? So again, you can see that, and then you can see it again when we uncomment it. I think that while you're learning this stuff, and again, you may or may not agree with this, but I think that while you're learning this stuff, the best way to learn it is to put in a little bit of code and then look at what you just did. Or if you're saying, you know, yeah, I get what you're saying, Jeff, but you just put a lot of stuff in there. Well, then go back and comment out some of this stuff. All right, and take a look at it. That is the best way, I think, at least for you to learn. This says whatever the default font size would be for an H2 tag, make it 2.5 times that size. Does that make sense? All right. This says, that's pretty obvious, it says make it italic. This says I want the color of that to be steel blue. That's one of those built-in browser colors. Now, if I didn't want to say steel blue, I showed you this before, I could always come out and come in here and I could say hex code steel blue. And it'll come up with something. There's steel blue right there. 4682B4. All right, so I could do that. So somewhere in here, oops, that's not that one. There it is. So I could do it, I could put in this in RGB, or I could put in this with the pound sign. Or I can just use the word steel blue. And you'll notice it's one word. Don't put it in there as steel space blue. That doesn't make sense in the system. All right. Then it's telling it to indent it 45 pixels. And this is telling it to put a shadow around it. Basically top, bottom, and sides. And use that same steel blue color. Now, if there's anything in here that you're saying, well, we never really talked about text indent. We never really talked about text shadow. First of all, yes, we did. It's in your book. Or if you want to look at it in more depth and breadth of coverage, go out to W3 Schools. Just Google text-indent and or text-shadow. Because again, they will not only explain it to you, but they will give you examples. All right. What I do want to mention here is if you look here, we've got a combination of percentages, right there, of percentages and pixels. All right. What you're going to find is the more things that you either use percentages or the more things you use EMs, and the less you use pixels, the more naturally responsive your page is going to be. So you might say, fine, then like in here, why did you use pixels? Because I've got to divide, if I want 3 pixels, I've got to say, okay, 3 pixels. There's 16 pixels in an M, so 3/16, that's going to be like 0.18 something or other. I could have done that also. All right. But what you're going to find as we go and build these and make them more and more responsive, there are going to be times I'll say to you, make sure you take this attribute and use percentages or use M's. All right. And our H3, same kind of thing. Font size now will be 1.5 times its regular size, and we'll also be indenting here. And again, that indentation, again, the best way I can show that to you, I'm just going to take this whole thing here, and I'm going to comment out everything for H3. All right, then I'm going to come back here, and this is the H3. I think it is. See what happened? Again, is that pretty obvious? That is the default font size once we added normalize, and that's with no text indent. I mean, how did I come up with a 45? Am I that smart? Hell no. You play with it a little bit till it looks pretty much the way you want it to look. That's all. If I did the same kind of thing in here, if I commented that out, all right, again, you can see exactly what happened. I still have my float left in there. If I comment the float left out, now it looks like it did when we first copied it in from Chapter 3. All right. So I'm going to uncomment that. Anything, I'm asking the question, anything that we've done in here that doesn't make sense to anyone. All right. So if we go back and we look at our index, we now, you don't put any CSS on any of this stuff. That's what doesn't appear on the page. So we've done our header. Okay. So what's next? Well, as far as I can tell, we're inside a main now. And the next thing is the section. So that's the next thing we have to plan our CSS for. Does that make sense? All right. And what do we have in here? Well, H1s, paragraphs, block quotes, H3s, anchor tags. Pretty much looks like it. But any or all of those things could have their own CSS associated with them. All right. So again, I go back to here. And we adjusted the font size. Yeah, well, for the headings, we'll do all that in a minute. Now, what does it say here? Format the links in the section. That's how I knew that that should have been in a section tag, because I didn't see the word section before that. All right. So format those links so that they're displayed in maroon whether or not they've been visited. That's an important concept, because what that means is whether you've clicked on them or not clicked on them, they should be maroon. All right? When you click on it, that link is what's known as visited. You all know this. A visited link by default is purple and underlined by default. We want it to be maroon. All right? Why? Because that's what we're told here. All right? We floated the image already, and we indented the headings. We changed the color of the first heading to steel blue. We italicized it. We added the shadow. So we already did that. Okay? So I'm going to jump down into the section. All right? And these were the styles for the header section. So these will be the styles for the section. I know that sounds a little stupid. You don't have to do that, but I'm just opening up some area in here. All right. First thing we had in the section was an H1 tag. All right. And that H1 tag, again, this was just by eyeballing it. It may or may not be exactly correct. But the font size set to 160%. So that means take the font size that naturally would be set for an H1 tag and make it 1.6 times that amount. All right. Then we're going to have an H2. Then we're going to have an H3. For the H2, %130%. And for the H3, the color of these is supposed to be maroon, and the font size will be 110%. And while we're at it, we'll just put in, because the next thing is the paragraph, and there's just one line for the paragraph. For the paragraph, it's just font size 100%. I will let you put that in, then we'll go back and we'll talk about each one of these. If I save that and go back and run it again, oops, don't know why I keep running that one, but I do. You can hopefully see how it's starting to change. All right. Again, it is not done yet, but it's got to start. The reason that we go in and we add that font size to all of these is because we use that normalize.css. So we are taking control over exactly how big those H tags and the paragraph is going to be. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. And again, the reason that you typically add the normalize.css, or as I mentioned in an earlier class, Eric Meyer's reset.css, the reason you normally use one of those or the other is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that the page resonates or looks the same as much as it possibly can on different types of browsers and on different versions of the same browser. There is no magic bullet where you can do, I do that, now it's going to look exactly the same in Firefox and in IE and in Edge and in Chrome and even in any version. That isn't going to happen. The other thing is, think about this. There are, for last I heard, there are literally now, there's about 30 different browsers, approximately. And when you think of, geez, every time I go and look, for example, at Firefox, it's like version 65.2 or release 60. You can't, you literally could spend all of your time on your website just testing it in every browser that ever existed. Why would you want to test something in IE2? There might still be 0.0001% of people who are using that browser, but you can't technically please everybody. Those people should have to go and upgrade to a better browser. All right. So this says all H1 tags will be 1.6 times what the default height was. H2 will be 1.3. H3 will be 1.1. This says as we go in and we're adjusting the size as we're going in and we're adjusting the size of our paragraphs based on the type of medium we're looking at, or if we make our browser narrower or wider, try to have the font size take up 100% of whatever whatever it would normally. All right. So what else is in there? Well, we have those A tags. All right. And they're different. What do I mean? Well, if we've got a section and we've got an A link, or we've got a section that's got an A visited, all right, so and you got to spell visited right, all right, for either one of those, we want the color to be maroon. All right, and I'm going to copy that code right there, put it in again, and this one will say not link and visited, this one will say hover, not there, and focus, and this will be steel blue. Again, when I run this, bring it up. Why I keep running that one, I have no clue. Notice how the colors have changed, and notice when I put my mouse over them, how it changes again. All right. So this says, this is default. This is after we click it. This is when we take our mouse and put it over it. And this is when we take our mouse and put it over it and click, but haven't let go yet. All right. Do you understand that I put the comma there, which means both of these will adhere to this, both of these will adhere to this? That makes sense? All right. If we wanted all of them to do the same thing, regardless, then we would have added all four of these and said maroon or steel blue. That's everything. That is everything that's in our sections section. All right, that's everything. So the last thing that we're going to do, I'm just going to grab my comment here. The last thing that we have to do is for our, no, second last, I'm sorry, is for our aside section. All right, not very much, 3 or 4 things. Then the footer, then we're done. We may be done by 10:15. If we are, another break. You come back, we'll do our test review, and then the rest of the period will be lab. All right? So the aside section. You know, I always like to kind of take a look at the section first, so let's see what's in there. What's in that aside? Well, there's H2 tags, there's UL tags, there's LI tags, there's A tags. As far as I can tell, those are the 4 things that are in there. H2, UL, LI, and A. Those are the 4 things that are in there. So at most, I'm going to have 4 different things that I put in there. All right? So start putting stuff in. Let's take a look first and see what we're told to put in that aside section. Format the links in the aside so they're bold, steel blue, whether or not they've been visited. So we did that whether or not before. So that's A:link and A:visited. Those will both be bold, font weight bold, and those will both be steel blue. All right, so they will have the color of steel blue. Okay, so let's put that in first. In fact, before we even do that, remember there's an H2 in there. So we have to play with the font size on that. What did we say our font size was up here for an H2? We said 130%. See that? So I'm just going to grab that. So that's the first thing. In fact, I want to say aside H2. Sorry, that's my aside stuff. And my unordered list, I'm going to play with the line height on that. Make it 1.5. So make it about 1.5 times the size it was. All right. Yeah. And that's wrong. That's link, I'm sorry. And that's hover and focus. And that will not be bolded, but it will be for room. All right, after you get done with this, literally we have 3 lines to go just for the footer, and there's 1 line in the footer. So I'll put that up there so you can take a quick look at everything that's there. Yes? Thank you. So now you can see the entire aside section there. And again, we have to do the footer. That's literally, we're going to type in, it'll take us a minute or 2 to type that in. Now the only thing that's new on there is the line height, and that literally is the height of a line. So we want to make that bigger. It's one way that you can do it. All right? And the rest of the stuff we've looked at already, so hopefully at least there are no questions about that stuff. Okay, I'm going to push this down a little bit, and we're going to put in the stuff for the footer. Again, let's take a quick look. The footer has what? Well, technically, we should have put that into a paragraph. All right? It's going to be much easier to manipulate it, so I'm going to just throw this whole thing right here into a paragraph. Sorry I didn't do it in the last one. Apologize for that. Again, I can put it on each one on its own line. It really and truly doesn't matter that much because it's small. So go into your footer and please surround your footer with paragraph tags. So that's all that's in there. It's just paragraph tags. Okay? Normally, when you put a footer in, this is no requirement, but normally when you put a footer in, 2 things about it. Normally, it's centered, and normally it's a little bit smaller than the other text. Those are just guidelines. There's no hard and fast rule that says you have to do that. So I'm going to go back to here, whoops, and I'm going to put in for my footer, which has just a paragraph in it, 2 lines of code. Text align, center, and font size 85%. Just those 2 things. I'll come right back to it, but when I go run this, when I go run this, now you can see now that it's centered and it's a little smaller than the other stuff. All right, again, I can make this, if I go and start changing the size, I can make it look very similar to what it shows on that page. All right. So what's left is this. And I've saved both, so that's good. Now, we're just about finished, but before we do finish, I'm going to do this. I'm in Git right now. I jump back over to Git. Now, if I type in, hopefully you remember this from yesterday, Git status, it's showing me what's in there. This is the stuff that it's saying that it's been changed. All right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say git add, okay? And I'm just going to say dot. I'm going to just add everything. All right? This is that thing, remember when we talked about that CRLF? Do you remember that when we went and downloaded the package? This basically says, hey, you've got LFs, we're going to replace them with CRLFs. It's a line feed versus a carriage return line feed. It doesn't mean that much of anything. All right? So the next thing that we want to do, so we've just staged those files, so we're going to say git commit -m, all right? And we're going to put a comment in here, Chapter 4 changes implemented. That's not the greatest comment. If you don't like it, really, put in your own comment. That's just fine. And hit enter. And notice what it says. This is all the stuff that it's added. And the reason that it added so many things is we copied the stuff over, but we didn't commit those changes until right now. All right? I'm trying to introduce Git to you slowly. All right? It's something that you're going to be using for this semester and the 3 semesters to follow. So just git space commit -m in some like Chapter 4 changes or whatever. All right? Now if I go back in here and I go back in and I look, in my Git folder, some of these files have literally changed. It's 1008, and you can see the ones that changed. The log file, something in the log folder changed because that logs all your changes. All right? Something in the objects folder changed. The commit edit message, and you can see that index in there changed. We don't have to worry about those. But as we get into this and we use it more and more, we're going to be committing more frequently. And I don't want to do it right now, but hopefully next week we're going to get our Bitbucket account and you're going to learn how to push that stuff out to a server. All right? Does anyone have any questions on anything that we put in here, any of this CSS that we put in here for Chapter 4, or the changes I had you make here and here in the index.html file? I didn't say this, but they must be in that order. If you reverse the order, it goes and it takes all the changes you just made and it overwrites them with what's in normalize. You wouldn't want to do that. So if you ever go and add multiple files like that, and you're like, I made all my changes, it doesn't look any different. Look at the order in which you put those files in. When we get into Bootstrap, which won't be for a few weeks yet, the order becomes even more important. All right? Any questions on any of this? All right. Then it's 10:10. Let's just take 10. No, no pun intended. Let's come back then at 10:20, and I will give you a review for the Chapter 3 test, and I will give you a review for the Chapter 4 test. All right? Yes, for now. Yeah.